Sam Alcoff, Steve Martinez, Dina Guzder, Amy Littlefield, Robbie Karen. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Our website is democracynow.org. Thanks for joining us.
And it's 1 o'clock, and you're listening to the one and only WMPG and W281AC, Gorham, Portland. We are Southern Maine and Eastern New Hampshire Community Radio, broadcasting live at 90.9 and 104.1 FM from the University of Southern Maine, and streaming on the web at WMPG.org. Next up is Nonprofit Insider. WMPG is on the air thanks to donations from our listeners and through grant support from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The CPB promotes the growth and development of public media in communities throughout America. Online at cpb.org. Why don't we take a look at the weather?
WMPG AccuWeather. In Portland today, it's partly cloudy or partly sunny, depending on whether you're an optimist or pessimist. 75 degrees. It's going to be sunny all day with a high of 75, a low of 57. And tomorrow is going to be a carbon copy of today. Sunday, cloudy with a high of 72, a low of 55. And Monday to Wednesday, it's going to be the same deal.
Driving, music's blaring in my ears, engines roaring.
Welcome to Nonprofit Insider. Excuse me. My name is David Unger, and I'm pleased to be hosting a show with executive directors and key people of local nonprofits. I've worked in the nonprofit world for over 30 years. In those years, I've realized that the majority of the community does not know about the organizations that provide critical services and benefits to our community that we sometimes take for granted. This is a chance to hear about the organizations that touch so many in our community. The opinions expressed on Nonprofit Insider are not necessarily those of WMPG, its staff and underwriters, or of USM. Last week at Last week at the end of the show, I announced that Governor Paul LePage was going to be our guest this week. Unfortunately, we got an announcement from his office that he had a scheduling conflict and couldn't make it. And we're very fortunate today to have Donna Betts with us. And Donna is the executive director of Family Hope. And just for the record, I didn't pull her off the street. She was scheduled for 2 weeks from now, and she was extremely flexible and was able to come in. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you, David. Jeez.
How are you today?
I'm really well. How are you?
Good. So, what is Family Hope?
We are an organization which supports families of people who live with mental illness.
Okay.
And you want my story?
Well, I was going to get there, but what do you mean by support families with mental illness?
Well, let me tell my story first, and I think it'll become clear.
Okay.
My oldest son had depression, and when he was 18, it was just like a seasonal depression. As he got older, it became a little bit worse and worse. And one year, it got really bad. He had moved back home, and I noticed that he was sleeping a lot, and he just was not feeling well. So I called around trying to find resources for him because I really didn't know what to do.
And if I could just interrupt, you were in the nonprofit world at that point, so you had a lot of contacts and resources that you could call based on your own knowledge.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. I did call around, and because he was an adult, he was 23, I could not make any appointments for him. And I found that extremely frustrating. And so I finally called a help number and I said, well, I understand I can't make any appointments for him. I can't make him go to a doctor. There isn't anything I can do. So what is there for family members? Because we're all very worried about him and we just want to know what are some things that we can do to support him, maybe be a little proactive. And I was told that there isn't anything like that out there, but you could call us here 24 hours a day. And I remember getting off the phone and I just started crying and I was thinking to myself, so what do we have to do? Sit here and watch our son die? And that's what happened. He died by suicide.
I'm really sorry.
Thank you. So a couple years later, I was obviously still thinking about it and just thought there has to be something for family members out there in the mental health world. And so with the help of some really wonderful people, we started Family Hope. And the supports that we give I like to say that we're an entryway into the mental health system, because when Josh was very sick, I went online and I typed in mental health in Maine, and I got 3,000 hits. And because I didn't know what was happening, I didn't know where to start. So Family Hope is that starting point.
So someone who unfortunately may be going through a situation like you did can contact you, and you will help them navigate through the system as to what's available and what's not.
Exactly.
Okay.
And our website has a lot of information, just basic information, just to start families on their way. So we're kind of like the person that will hold your hand until you're able to navigate that system by yourself to be able to find the resources that you and your loved one need.
Now, do you have staff or do you have per diem people besides you? Because you're basically
We're small.
You're considered a startup still at this point.
We are,
right?
absolutely. We're 2 years old, and I'm the only full-time employee, but we do have some fantastic volunteers, and we have just hired a per diem social worker who is taking care of our new Family Support Navigator program.
And what's that?
So this program, we're just very excited about it. So when people call and they would like to, they need a little more help, what we do is we pair our social worker with the family member. She will meet with them one-to-one. She does an assessment of what's going on just to make sure that the family is safe. And she helps them make, she plans for next steps. What are concrete things that they can do even though their loved one, especially adult loved ones, don't want help? So what we found that's happening is that a lot of these adult kids, it's usually between 20 and 30, they don't want to admit that there might be something wrong. They don't want to go for help. But the families are still extremely worried. And because their kids are adults, there's nothing that they can do. So we help them to be proactive. We show them where the resources are for that eventuality when their loved one says, you know, Mom, maybe I should go see somebody. So the family is prepared. And also just to educate them about mental illness. What is it and what are some of the signs? And we also, of course, the suicide prevention. We want to be able to tell family members what are the signs and symptoms of a possible upcoming suicide so that they can stem that.
Sounds like really great work and much needed in the state.
Thank you very much.
Are there other models around the country like this, or is this kind of the cutting edge?
I'm a maverick, David. There are similar programs for families with children under 18.
Okay.
Older than 18, there really aren't. There is one program in California that's similar, but they don't use an LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker. And we felt that piece was very important because they understand the whole gamut and they know where the resources are. Canada is also very progressive, and they have a very similar program. So I've been able to pull some of the things that they do into creating this model, this new program that we have here in Maine. So Maine's the first, really.
That's great. So besides getting the program off the ground and educating the community, what do you see some of the issues are as an executive director of a startup?
Well, the challenge is...
Besides funding.
I know. Well, everybody knows funding is a big deal.
Right.
But it's been... The past 2 years have been mostly flying by the seat of my pants, just trying to get the organization up and get this program running. So now we're in a place where the board and I are really looking towards the strategic planning for the future. We want to become a self-sustaining organization where we're not relying on state or federal funding.
And that's where your funding is right now?
We don't get state and federal funding. All our funding right now is from private donations and from foundations within Maine. So we don't want to have to rely on that forever. So we are looking at different revenue sources that we may be able to bring into the organization to really help cover the majority of the programs. We always need to take in donations. That
right.
We're a nonprofit. But if we can get most of our funding through other revenue sources, then that really is our goal. So that's really very challenging.
How large is your board?
Right now we have 5 board members, and we have a really good cross-section, and they are very engaged with our organization, and they really want to see it succeed, and they really believe in our mission.
So how many individuals do you think that you could potentially touch in the state of Maine?
Well, in the state of Maine, there are 265,000 families who are affected by mental illness every year. That's a lot.
How many?
265,000. And that's any kind of mental illness. The people that we work with, their loved ones usually have serious mental illness, and there are 63,000 families in Maine who live with somebody with a serious mental illness. What was your question?
How many?
What's our potential?
What is your potential? What's your goal?
Well, as we're rolling out this
program, let her do the weather, and look what happens.
As we roll out this program, our goal for our first year is 200 families.
Okay.
So that's families. So there's an average of 2 to 3 people per family. So we can touch around 600 for our first year. Our plan is to go statewide. Right now we're focusing on southern Maine, but our plan is to go statewide, and so we're working on that capacity building piece also.
I don't know if you've drilled down far enough into the budget process yet, but what do you think the anticipated cost for family would be?
$400.
Oh, okay.
I have drilled down, David.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was giving you the benefit of the doubt if you didn't know. So if it costs $400 per family, and you're trying to get donations, so 200 families, you're looking at a significant amount of money.
Yes.
So let's go back to the challenges of a board and a startup organization. And we're going to get to that in a second, but what was the number, 265,000 you gave me?
Yes.
What was that again?
That's the number of families affected by mental illness. 265,000 is
in Maine.
In Maine.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so what I do before we go into our mid-break is to ask a trivia question.
Okay.
And then we go to break, and I expect to get the right answer. The trivia question is, how many Americans are affected by a mental health condition in the United States each year?
Mm-hmm.
This is David Unger on Nonprofit Insider on WMPG, Southern Maine and Eastern New Hampshire's Community Radio. Today we have with us Donna Betts, who's the Executive Director of Family Hope. Do you know the answer?
57.7 million.
Actually, from the NAMI website, it says 60 million Americans. So,
Well, come on, 57.7 is awfully close. Let's round up. Let's round up.
she does not get the bumper sticker prize. All right. So let's talk about, again, some of the challenges of a startup, because in my consulting practice, I talk to people all the time, and they're always saying, well, I want to start a nonprofit, and I want to do this. And okay. So did you do it, and obviously you did, because if you're the only program in the state that does this, but did you do an analysis of what other programs there are out there and what you'd be competing with?
When I first came up with the idea, I approached some very active people within the mental health system first to see if there was something like what we're doing within the state. And what I found was that there wasn't. So we went to a lot of different organizations to see if they would be able to pick up this type of program, but because of funding, that really didn't work out. So, being a stubborn person, I decided to go ahead and start one. But I did approach a lot of different organizations and talk to them about what they thought about having another nonprofit within the area. And one of the concerns was trying to get funding from the same funders that every other nonprofit is trying to get.
So you found that the nonprofit community in this area was very territorial?
No? Actually, no. I have found that the people who run the nonprofits are extremely approachable, extremely supportive of what we're doing. But I think when we started, there was just concern about an organization starting and then fizzling out.
Right, which is fairly common.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of startups that get going and then they just don't have the funding.
Right.
So you have sustainable funding for a period of time now?
Yeah, we have enough for another year and a half,
Okay.
which is good, yeah.
So can you explain walk us through what would happen if a family member would call your office?
So a family member calls our office and they speak to me. And so I just try to get some basic information from them.
So you're doing an intake?
I'm doing an intake. Usually when people call, they're in crisis mode. It's gotten to the point where they're really afraid that their loved one, it just isn't going to make it. So I will tell them about some resources that are available for them and then tell them about the Family Support Navigator program to see if they would like to be able to take advantage of that. Right now, that program is not free. I do have to say that. It's covered by one insurance company will cover part of the program, but the rest would have to be self-pay. We are working with the other insurers within the state to try to cover the program. We're also approaching businesses to ask them if they would like to have the Family Support Navigator program as part of their employee assistance programs.
But if a donor wanted to give you a check for $400, that would cover one family?
It would cover one family. We would be able to help that family.
Okay.
Yep.
So the social worker goes out and visits with the family.
Yep.
And then what happens?
The family will receive a plan. They actually have access to the social worker for 30 days because when you meet one time with a social worker, there's just so much information coming at you. There's no way that you can remember all of it. We also have what we call a Hope Information Guide, and it is filled with basic information for the family so that they can go through it at their leisure whenever they want to. It has information like how do you know if what you're looking at is a crisis or if it's an emergency, and what do you do in each instance. There's information about how do you talk to somebody who might be psychotic at that time, because it's very different from talking to you, or maybe it's like talking to you, David. I'm not really sure which one.
Right.
and just information like what happens when your loved one goes to a psychiatric hospital, or information like that. That's really good for people to know so that they can be prepared in the eventuality that would happen.
When a family calls in crisis mode, though, they're usually not, from my experience, not receptive to being educated. They just want the problems fixed or resolved.
Yeah, you know, I don't find that at all. Yep, I find that people really want to know more about mental illness, and they really want to know more about what they can do. So what we try to do is help them to become proactive so that they can be ready if something happens. Because most of the people, I'd say about 95% of the people who've called us, they're parents of adult male children who are between 20 and 30. It's almost, when I pick up the phone, I almost know exactly what they're going to say, you know, and then can just kind of guide them to resources. And I do want to say that even if somebody couldn't take advantage of the Family Support Navigator program, I will still talk with them and help them and just verbally tell them a few things that they can do. It's just not in depth like the program is. So
what happens after the 30 days and they're still in crisis?
Well, you know, I talked with our social worker about that, and she would still absolutely answer questions and help them. I do want to be clear, though. They may still be in crisis after 30 days. It depends on their loved one. Just because they come to our program doesn't mean their adult son is miraculously going to go into treatment. But what we're doing is giving them the tools to stand on their own, to be able to stand on their own.
So it's almost like an advocacy group.
Yeah, an advocacy group. It's more like case management for the family member, not for the person who was ill.
Okay, so you're not actually providing services to the family members, but you're providing the support and the resources for the family members to take advantage of.
Yes, like you mean direct services, like our social worker is not sitting with them every week and
so they wouldn't do any therapy or counseling with them?
No.
Okay.
No.
But you're making the referrals to do that.
Absolutely. And one other thing that we're doing in the program is when our social worker recommends some therapists, we will call on behalf of the family members to see if the therapist is taking new patients, what insurance do they take, what is the wait time, so that the family members don't have to do that. That's one of the most frustrating things, is that you're in crisis and now you have to call a psychiatrist's office who may not get right back to you, or a therapist, and how do you know which one to call? So our social worker will make those recommendations, and then we will call on the family's behalf, and then if they choose to call, they can do so, and they know that they'll get right through.
So what do you see some of the largest challenges you have in the next 2 years?
And I can't say funding, right?
Nope, can't say funding.
I think, well, one of the things that we're focusing on right now is name recognition, because we're new and what we do is new. So getting people to know who we are, to hear Family Hope and say, oh yeah, I know what that is. And also to have an understanding exactly of what we do. Because a lot of people, when I explain it to them, they think that we're working with a person with mental illness. And we're not. We're working with their family to help them. So I think that's one of the challenges.
If someone who does feel they have a mental illness or need help and support, could they call you?
Yes, and I have received calls from people, and obviously I will recommend them to different places. It just depends on what their situation is. Oh, absolutely. We don't turn anybody away.
So with the family members, do you have a follow-up plan? So if somebody calls you and you don't hear from them again, do you reconnect with them on your own?
Yes, I do. I usually wait a couple weeks and then I just will call them back and just check in just to see how things are going. Most of the time, though, they don't need those checkup calls because they've taken the advice and they've moved forward to find those resources. Mm-hmm. So that's really very gratifying to know that people are following through.
What's been the biggest surprise that you've had when you started a nonprofit?
Biggest surprise? Well, I think, and this is a good surprise, I've been really surprised by the support within the nonprofit community. Not just mental health organizations, but other organizations too. People that I've met are just so supportive of what we're doing, and kind of amazed that a new nonprofit has been started for family members, and after 2 years we're still going.
Right. If you had to give advice to someone who is thinking about starting a nonprofit, what would it be?
Oh, get your ducks in a row. One of the good things about Family Hope is that, like you said, my background was in fundraising. I've worked in nonprofits forever and ever, so I knew what needed to be done. I knew we had to incorporate. I knew we needed a 501c3. So that wasn't very difficult. But if you're coming in fresh and you don't really understand about the fundraising piece, and that would be very difficult. So I would suggest that somebody, a really good resource is the Maine Association of Nonprofits.
Right. Scott was on here a couple weeks
ago. And contact them, because I did. I went and I spoke with Scott, and I said, okay, this is what I'm thinking of doing and starting a nonprofit. And he was just very generous with his time and gave me some really good advice. And I would recommend people just talk to everybody that you can. Go find another executive director of a nonprofit and get the lowdown on exactly what it would mean to start a nonprofit.
Right. One of the things that I find is that a lot of nonprofits that are starting up don't understand the risk factor that's involved in the liability issues.
Yeah.
So we're in a couple weeks, and I'm finalizing this. We're having a lawyer, accountant, and an insurance agent come and speak as a panel.
Yeah.
Because the three of them have to work together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nonprofits sometimes don't understand that the legalities and the accountabilities of things that you do.
Right. There are
especially
so many
smaller ones.
Right, and there are so many good people who want to do good work.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that a nonprofit, just like a for-profit business, is going to be profitable. You have to be very strategic in your thinking, and you really need to do your homework.
So, if you had 30 seconds and we just met on an elevator and you wanted to ask me for money, what would you tell me?
I'd tell you the story about a family.
I'm timing you.
All right. Tell you the story about a woman who called me, and she was in tears, and she was so worried about her son, and she felt that he was in danger of suicide and he really needed help. And so I was able to send her to the resources that luckily she needed. And when I heard back from her, her son is doing much better, and he's in treatment, and the threat of suicide is no longer there. And I can't tell you how gratifying that is, especially losing my son, that we were able to help somebody else. Excuse me.
Do you have any questions for me?
I don't have any questions for you. David, let me think.
They have to be professional. Donna and I have known each other for many,
a long time. A long time. Well, okay, so you know our organization and you know me well enough. What would you suggest that we do strategically? What would be the next step for us? Did I stump the host?
No. I have a whole laundry list, and I have to figure out what I can do in a minute. You had talked about the strategic planning process.
Yes.
And I assume there's a development planning process of
Mm-hmm.
how you're going to raise the money.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the advice, the generic advice I could give you would be, in not knowing all the details behind it, is one of the things that I find a very common mistake, especially for startups, is that the strategic goals that they create don't necessarily match the development goals. So the two should really walk hand in hand. And when you talk about strategic planning, I really encourage small organizations to focus in on goals and measurability and accountability, and don't worry about all the fluff in the beginning and the end of a traditional strategic plan. Get used to the planning process of goals and implementing it and raising money to meet those goals.
Terrific. Thank you.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, it did make sense. Yeah. And how much time do we have?
About 2 minutes.
Okay. We are actually very fortunate. We're going to be working with the Institute for Civic Leadership, and they have a program called Springboard.
Right.
It was actually through the Common Good Ventures.
Right. They
They've
just
merged. Right. So we have the opportunity to present to business people within the community and tell them, all about Family Hope and what our big questions are. So they're going to be able to brainstorm and give us some really good advice. So we're very excited about it. My entire board wants to go and be there.
Great.
So yeah, we're very excited.
And if someone wanted to contact you or look you up, how would they do that?
www.familyhopeme.org, or they could call us at 207-396-4313.
Great. Well, Donna, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, David.
Was a hoot.
I really
It was good
appreciate
seeing
it.
you
Yeah, it was
again.
nice seeing you too.
Okay, so Nonprofit Insiders every Friday at 1 o'clock. The music appears courtesy of Mike Hubbard. You can find it on www.michaelhubbard.music.com. Check out Mike's website to see where he's playing. Thanks to Deb Danger, NPI's executive engineer. You can catch Deb on Morning Street Fridays at 6:30. If you know a nonprofit that should be on the show, please email me at npi@davidunger.net. And if you want to catch recordings of past shows, please go to www.tcmgr.com and click the NP Insider tab, and all the shows are recorded and hosted there. Until next week.
And please stay tuned for Zvuki Rossi. I'll get it sooner or later. Music from Mother Russia, only on WMPG, W281 AC, Gorham, Portland. Thank you, everybody.